Ho 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 nerds, I'm Alex.
And I'm Dani.
And we're seriously nerdy about a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff that includes the holiday season.
Yee!
Welcome to a very seriously nerdy Winter Wonderland extravaganza! Other words!
Snowflakes!
Yeah.
I don't know if we're gonna figure out snowflakes.
We're gonna cue to the title. Following the enthusiasm we felt for the Halloween house glow up, we went back to Michael's. We got another Lemax holiday house, but this time for the winter season.
Ooh.
So if you liked seeing tiny autumn leaves, get ready for sparkly winter snow. Yeah, I entice them with the nature elements. That's what they're here for.
Terrain.
For this one, we selected a brand new for 2022 Lemax holiday house. This is Miss Maggie's Muffin Shop. We are about to turn it into Magnus's fabulous muffin bakery straight out of the North Pole. One of the things I was so excited about Miss Maggie's Muffin Shop is it's got lots of different exterior textures. It's got siding, tile, brick. Which was really fun to play in. Best of all, it had 2 windows.
2?
What? Upgraded for inflation with 2 windows, which meant we did get to do characters in both windows. And we can't wait for you to meet them.
Now time to condense a whole lot of hard work into 20 minutes worth of video.
My youth!
The Lemax house we chose was originally Miss Maggie's Muffin Shop. Cute little 2-story freestanding bakery. As you can see, the original shop went heavy into a dark holiday color scheme, deep reds, hunter green, dark blue. It's perfectly fine, but you know us. We're gonna make this extra.
As you can see, we wasted no time laying waste to some of the exterior features through a combination of pliers and a screwdriver. I wouldn't recommend using the screwdriver. It came pretty dangerously close to my fingies at times. Next, I rolled out some clay to start everyone's favorite tedious and unnecessary detail, shingles. I cut them out using a wee cookie cutter that Dani 3D printed, and then I textured the surfaces and baked them. There are only about a dozen here, but I definitely ended up doing about 100 more off camera. Always remember to make more shingles.
Then we took a quick break outside to do some dremeling to drill into the floor of the interior and remove some accessories from the outside. With those accessories removed, I turned my attention to the back of the bakery. Now, it was originally covered in some windows, but it sort of bugs us that there are windows that don't let any light out. So we thought this might be a fun time to try our hand at clay and bring some of the brick texture that's on the sidewall around to the back of the building as well. The thought was maybe with a little brick texture and some plaster, we could make it look like a distressed surface that I could paint a mural on later. Stick around, we'll see if it works out. Happy to say that the bake went well, and I was able to move on to plaster, which is just a mixture of plaster of Paris and some watered down Elmer's glue to create some mural foundation.
Once Dani was done baking her beautiful brick wall, it was time for me to break out the Sculpt-A-Mold. This worked out great on the Halloween house, so I used the same technique to create a foundation over the existing roofing. After the Sculpt-A-Mold had set, I used tacky glue to lay down rows upon rows of these sweet clay boys, like scales made out of witchy, flesh-colored fingernails. In the spirit of wabi-sabi, I tried not to dwell on the imperfections. I'm still learning my way around an airbrush, but without a doubt, it beats base coating by hand any day.
We looked at a lot of different sources for inspiration for our color scheme. Knowing this would be the first house of a series, we needed to have something that would go back to year after year. We considered an icy blue scheme, sort of Frozen-esque, and even looked at some more neutral palettes of Rankin Bass stop-motion movies. But what we really fell in love with was a photo of a wreath that was champagne with lots of pinks and turquoises. It still has those base elements of red and green Christmas vibes, but I loved the addition of this creamy gold. It felt sort of bright and cheery and nutcracker. So the first coat I did was to those champagne and white areas as well as the grout for the brick. This is one of those times where crafts are not real life. You would rarely paint the trim of your house before the walls, but on a miniature, those small details first make life so much easier down the road. Speaking of starting with what's easy to paint, The trick to tiny bricks is also opposite. You might think that you'd paint the red brick first, then go in with a little brush and paint the grout lines, but no, that is a trap. The secret is actually to paint everything gray first, then paint the bricks individually, avoiding the grout areas.
To populate Maggie's Muffin Shop, we found this gingerbread knight from Reaper Miniatures 2021 holiday series. It seemed oddly appropriate to have a gingerbread man as an employee at a bakery. This feels like the appropriate time to mention that Dani refuses to acknowledge the existence of the DreamWorks movie Shrek, which does in fact feature both a gingerbread man with gumdrop buttons and a muffin man.
Look, no shade. We just grew up a very pro-Disney household, and Shrek was a little too intense for us.
For Maggie, we repurposed this miniature that we pulled out of a discount tabletop miniatures leftovers box and took this very serious looking butcher and turned him into a very serious looking baker daddy.
Where once he held a cleaver, now we gave him a pipette bag, and in his outstretched hand, a muffin.
So hopefully no surprise to you that once we have characters and storyline in place, it makes everything else much easier. So because I'd already done those hard to reach details of champagnes and whites, it was time to start laying on the big colors. And in this case, because we had this champagne wreath inspired color palette, we knew we were going to get a play in lots of pinks and corals and turquoises, and it was just a matter of kind of deciding what section was going to be what color and then committing hard. Now, if this seems intimidating, just know it's only paint, and you can always go back later and change it. In most cases, maybe not every case, but in most cases, this isn't permanent, so have fun with it, take big risks, try out colors that work, and see where they land. For the cute little tiles in the alleyway, I used the same technique I did for the brick, painting the grout first and then adding the color in a little pattern. I liked the idea that Maggie was inspired by these vintage tiles in the alleyway, and he used that color scheme when it was time to repaint the front of the building after he bought it. Because this is sort of a cheery holiday house, I knew I couldn't go as moody and dramatic with shades as I might normally on, say, a Halloween house. So most of the shades that I'm using are just more intense versions of the colors that they're being put on top of. Even things like the weathered plaster couldn't look too weathered or worn down because this is a happy, cheery Christmas wonderland. So everything is a little pulled back and not as realistic as it might be on another build. For the sidewalks, I went with a really bright blue-gray, which helped establish this cold winter vibe even before the snow was added. This blue shade also pops really nicely against all of the warm pinks that it's going to butt up against, and just gives a cheery winter vibe.
Dani took the design over the door and used it as a basis to create these really cool design patterns on the outside of the building. I don't know how she freehands any of this. I honestly, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it's surgical. It doesn't... It's inhuman. I don't understand it. It might be witchcraft.
Now, the original Lemax house came with sculpted awnings. Even the stripes were carved into the porcelain to suggest that they were sort of fabric, but made of porcelain. So I thought some natural texture might be fun. So I masked off some leftover muslin I had, and I used that to create real fabric awnings in exactly the color that I needed them to be. After the paint dried, I cut them to size and tacky glued them in place, not knowing that they're gonna sit as cleanly as I necessarily want them to, but this is when knowing that snowdrifts are coming later is your friend. Still, even knowing snow was coming, I wanted to make sure that there was a clean edge of the awnings, so I quickly painted some coffee stir sticks red and used those just for the very top. It also provides a nice pop of color. The more I work on these little model kits and dioramas, the more I realize so much of your time is just spent waiting for paint to dry. So I try to hop around to different areas of the house to work on them as other areas are drying, like moving to the roof or to these little side accessories, just to be making sure that I'm using my time as best as possible. All right, it's snow time, babies. So I did a little snow test with a few different glues and craft supplies before I finally committed to my formula, and I'm really happy with the results. So you can see I took a Ziploc bag and did 2 different formulas. One of them is Mod Podge and clear glass glitter glue. The other side is Mod Podge and turf snow powder. The dried sort of glitter ends up looking like slush, and the turf terrain snow looks like really fluffy, delightful snow. So having 2 sides of this bag let me very quickly detail the sidewalks to make it look like the snow was sort of melting into slush. I would pipe out, which is very similar to sort of frosting a cake, these swaths of snow, and then go back with a wet paintbrush just to tap them and shape them so they had a more natural, less frosting-like texture. And it actually ended up working really well. The moisture that was on the tip of the paintbrush would almost melt the snow texture in really natural ways and created some sort of lovely results. You know, maybe my favorite thing about working on this house is that it does have that Christmas magical realism vibe, so it doesn't have to be perfect or realistic. It can kind of be storybook perfection. The snow can be a little too round or formed in perfect clumps, because that's the magic of Christmas.
Despite the fact that we started off by yanking the wreaths and other exterior features off of the Lemax model, we did decide we wanted to go back and add the greenery back at the end. So Dani came up with the idea of reshaping them using clay. She made some wonderful, tiny, intricate little bows to replace the bows that we had pulled off, and then stubbled up some clay wreaths to deck the halls. Once we had some nicely airbrushed wreaths and ribbons, it was time to apply some flocking and other greenery onto the outside of the wreaths to give them a real texture.
No surprise here, but I am seriously nerdy about typefaces, and I had a really hard time deciding on a typeface for this North Pole village. Ultimately, I settled on this sort of black letter, Gothic calligraphy that felt very Christmas movie North Pole. For these signs, I typically lay them out on the computer first, and then I eyeball them onto the miniature. Because they're done by hand, nothing ever feels perfect, and it gives everything this handmade aesthetic. It works really well for a place like a North Pole bakery. I absolutely stole my trick from the Halloween house of creating a very simplified icon for the little dangly sign. In this case, it was the exclamation point graphic and a muffin. Of course it was. Now for the back mural, I sort of got to invent the history of this old building and decided before it was a bakery, it was home to the North Pole Mitten Company. Maggie and his husband loved this old building so much they knew they had to give it new life as a bakery. And this was the point when I decided maybe too far into the story realm, but Maggie's husband is an artist or a historian, something along those lines, and he made Maggie keep the old mural. The agreement was the beautiful sort of distressed brick had to stay and Maggie could do whatever he wanted to the front and side of the building. The 1940s Santa graphics here were really fun to freehand. I just had to figure out what parts of the wall would retain the mural and what parts would have worn off over the time. But I liked that there's phrases and words that you don't catch the whole part of just because they've been worn over time. I know the catchphrase of North Pole brand mittens because I made it up. But if you have any guesses for what that catchphrase or slogan there at the bottom is, tell us in the comments. The winner will get a gold star. Similar to Halloween House, any element that is glued on too well to be removed has to stay and become part of the storyline. And that was absolutely what happened with these sacks of flour and ingredients by this back door here. We couldn't get them off, so they've become part of the storyline.
Now it was time to take our finished clay wreaths and glue them onto the outside of the house.
As much as I love the base that came with the holiday house, it was up on a platform or a countertop and I needed Magnus to be standing. So I quickly hopped into Tinkercad and just 3D modeled a quick base that would be the exact same size. If you're interested in 3D modeling and you don't know where to start, I highly recommend Tinkercad. They're not paying me to say that, I just love it. It's free, it's so user-friendly, and I made this base just using basic shapes in a few minutes, and then I just 3D printed it. It's so satisfying to have something the exact shape that you need. So with that base, some plastic grid work, and then very stubborn muffin elements from the original house, I had all of the ingredients that I needed to sort of make this little interior moment for Magnus. Because I had a very small footprint of what would fit inside the house, I just propped up one of the muffin stands up on a little piece of styrofoam here, just to create a little bakery display case for Magnus. Then I turned my attention into the interior, where I painted up the 3D printed version and the little side walls here, as well as the floor. Because I committed super hard to this idea of stealing that detail design from the top of the exterior of the shop, I brought that inside to create this way over the top wallpaper that would sit on the back wall of the front window display. I also gave Gingerbread a plain turquoise one because it can't all be hand detailed paved walls, can it? Sometimes turquoise walls are just fine as well. Knowing that the interior fit in place all right and I no longer needed to access this front window, I put the original sheet of acrylic back in and then quickly cut some painted coffee stir sticks to build a little frame for the window. And then the last steps were just adding the detailed accessories back in, using all of those bows that I had sculpted, and of course, adding snow to everything that would have naturally caught snow from the exterior. And Maggie's home.
What did we learn?
What did we learn? I learned that it was helpful to do an off-camera snow test to learn different snow textures and how they behave. It's a very un-Dani thing to do because normally I'm very in the moment. That was one time that I'm glad that I took the extra effort just because it made the snow application much simpler.
Dani 3D printed a tiny cookie cutter that I used to make my shingles, which was so inspired, so we're definitely going to do that in the future. Clay is a little finicky sometimes, and having something that will cut it for you is just like, I think we're getting better with the airbrush. I definitely base coated this and then did our zenithal highlights, and it splattered the first time I did the zenithal highlights, but you know, you persevere, you learn from your mistakes, and next time it won't splatter.
Yeah, I broke out the airbrush a couple times for this build just because it's so much easier. It still sucks to clean. So if you're thinking to yourself, I would like to get an airbrush, but are they really tricky to clean? Yes, it's the worst. I hate cleaning it. I hate it. I, as a color enthusiast, take great pride in being able to mix my own colors. When you're doing this many layers, it is so much faster if you have the color pre-mixed as your base coat. For the next house, we're going to straight up go to the craft store and pick out all of the colors just to save myself time along the way, because every time that I would just accidentally nick one of my trims, I would have to go and remix that color just to paint over that little nick.
I hope we keep doing these. I would love, after 3 or 4 years of these, for us to have small villages for each season that we can look back on and see our progress and our improvement, and also the weird world that we're building. Right now we have a muffin shop and a witch bookstore.
Which is perfectly on brand for who we are as humans.
It's true.
Should any of you be inspired to create your own glow-ups with your existing holiday houses, we would love to see them, so please share them on social media with hashtag nerdy holiday glow up. Wow, look, it's right there. We can't wait to see what you make.
If you want to know what holiday gift you can get us, it's your likes and your subscribes. And we'll give you something back. Probably our next video.
Oh, okay. I was worried you were going to promise small gifts.
My gift is this video and the one after it. After that, who knows? Hey, we got you a gift. It's final footage. Mushin shop?
It's a muffin shop. What do you want for Christmas?
Final footage.
Activity game. Tabletop.
We think it's a
adventure.
board game. We haven't
We don't
played
know what it is. He came loose.
He was a loose boy.
He's a loose boy.
I don't know that.
Uh-oh.
Cold never bothered me anyway.
That's the whole reason he got a permanent tattoo on his body, so he could say that.
You got a hot sauce packet.
I did.
Yeah.
So that when we do this, try to hold hands. There you go.
We match.
We're fire and
Does
ice.
it line up?
There will be garlands.
Pum, rum, pum, pum, pum. Why are you making it rain to Little Drummer Boy?